Loretta had gone to visit Santa Clara, having firmly decided to break things off with Billy once and for all. Billy, however, couldn't comprehend it. His sister reported that he had spent the entire night pacing the room and weeping. Loretta, too, hadn't closed her eyes and had cried nearly until dawn. Daisy knew this for certain. It was on her chest that Loretta had poured out her sorrow. Captain Kit, Daisy's husband, was also aware. Loretta's tears and Daisy's consolations had robbed him of sleep as well. Captain Kit, of course, had no intention of staying up through the night. Moreover, he had no desire for Loretta to marry, not Billy nor anyone else. He believed the younger sister ought to assist the elder with household matters. He never voiced this aloud. In his view, Loretta was far too young to be thinking about marriage. That was precisely why the idea occurred to him. Send her to Mrs. Hemingway, a place where Billy would not be. It took less than a week for Loretta to realize that Captain Kit's plan had been rather sensible. First of all, though Billy would never believe it, she truly didn't want to become his wife. And secondly, though Captain Kit would never believe it either, she truly didn't want to part with Daisy. After 2 weeks in Santa Clara, Loretta was absolutely certain. She did not want to marry Billy. But she was far less certain about leaving Daisy behind. Not because she loved her sister any less, but because a quiet doubt had begun to stir within her. On the day of Loretta's arrival, a certain plan began to take shape in Mrs. Hemingway's mind. By the very next morning, she confided to her husband, Jack Hemingway, that Loretta was absurdly naive, and that if not for her charming innocence, she might well be called a fool. To support her claim, Mrs. Hemingway shared such piquant details of Loretta's behavior that Jack couldn't help but burst into laughter. By the third day, the plan had taken on a definite form. That was when she composed a letter. The envelope bore the address, San Francisco, Athenaeum Club, Mr. Edward Bashford. Dear Ned. So began the letter. Once before her marriage, he had burned with passion for her for 3 intense weeks. But she had chosen Jack Hemingway, the first man to ask for her hand. This twist of fate did not break Ned's philosophically inclined spirit. He simply added the experience to his long catalogue of emotional trials, from which he had constructed his personal philosophy. By temperament and taste, he was a Hellenist, a disillusioned one. He loved quoting Nietzsche, insisting that he too had endured the inevitable disappointment that follows the fervent pursuit of truth. To worship appearance, he would repeat, to believe in forms, tones, words, in the whole Olympian realm of semblance. And he would always add, the Greeks were superficial out of their depth. Ned was a true young Hellenist, weary and disenchanted. In moments of relapse, he declared that women were deceitful and treacherous. He did not believe in their sincerity, yet, following the teachings of his German idol, he never tore away the delicate veil that concealed their duplicity. He accepted them as pure appearance and tried to adapt accordingly. He was superficial, by virtue of his depth. Jack asks me to tell you the bathing here is marvelous, wrote Mrs. Hemingway, and suggests you bring your fishing gear. She added that she could finally introduce Ned to a girl who was sincere and guileless, with an impeccable reputation. Never before has a purer, more flawless bud bloomed on this earth, she wrote. And to her husband she declared triumphantly, if I fail to marry Ned off this time, and left the sentence unfinished, the implication so dreadful that her lips refused to utter it and her imagination recoiled. Contrary to her fears, Loretta discovered that Santa Clara wasn't so terrible after all. Billy wrote to her daily, but his letters irritated her far less than his presence ever had. The separation from Daisy proved less painful than she had expected. For the first time, she was not overshadowed by her sister's mature beauty. In these favorable conditions, Loretta quickly stepped into the foreground, while Mrs. Hemingway modestly retreated into the wings. Loretta began to realize she was not a dim satellite reflecting borrowed light. Quite unconsciously, she became the center of a small orbit of attention. When she sat at the piano, someone was always ready to turn the pages. When she dropped her handkerchief, someone rushed to retrieve it. She was gladly accompanied on walks and helped in gathering flowers. She learned to cast her fishing line into quiet pools and beneath fallen logs without tangling it in the brush. Jack Hemingway disliked teaching novices and preferred solitude while fishing, often staying home. He left Ned free to perceive Loretta as mere appearance, and in that role, she perfectly suited his philosophy. Her blue eyes looked straight ahead, boyishly frank, and he admired them, forgetting to shudder at the treachery he believed lay hidden within. She was graceful as a slender flower, delicate as watercolor, and fragile as porcelain. These qualities enchanted him, making him forget the vital force beneath them, and Bernard Shaw, in whom he believed. Loretta was blossoming. She was becoming independent. Her will and desires were no longer bound to Daisy's. Jack indulged her, Alice Hemingway doted on her, and Ned was attentively devoted. They humored her whims and laughed at her mischief, while she began to develop the traits of a little tyrant, the kind that hides in every charming and elegant woman. Gradually, those around her dimmed the longing never to part from Daisy. That desire no longer tormented her as it had during her friendship with Billy. The more she saw Billy, the more she clung to Daisy. The more she saw Ned Bashford, the more she forgot her need to be near her sister. And Ned began to forget himself. He confused surface with depth, appearance with reality, until he began to see them as one and the same. Loretta was unlike other women. She was incapable of pretense. She was real. He confided all this to Mrs. Hemingway, who agreed, not without noting the expressive wink her husband gave her. That day, Loretta received a letter from Billy that differed from the others. Like all his letters, it was pathological, a litany of symptoms, sufferings, sleepless nights, and heart palpitations. Then came the reproaches, sharper than ever before. Their justice brought tears to her eyes, and a tragic expression settled on her face. With that expression, she descended to breakfast. Jack and Mrs. Hemingway grew thoughtful, and Ned grew uneasy. The couple exchanged glances, while Ned simply shook his head in bewilderment. "By evening, everything will be clear," Mrs. Hemingway told her husband. But Ned managed to find Loretta alone earlier that day, in the spacious drawing room. She tried to turn away, but he gently took her hands, and saw that her lashes were damp, her lips trembling. He looked at her with kindness, and the tears on her lashes shimmered even more brightly. There, sweetheart," he said softly. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, as if to shield her. And she, like a wounded child, rested her head against his chest. A tremor passed through him, a feeling unfamiliar to a Hellenist long recovered from bitter disappointment. "Oh, Ned," she sobbed, clinging to him, "if only you knew what a wicked woman I am." He smiled indulgently and drew a deep breath, taking in the scent of her hair. Thinking of his supposed experience with women, he sighed again. She seemed to him the embodiment of childlike purity, a breath of an innocent soul, as he phrased it inwardly. But her sobs grew more frequent. "What is it, darling?" he asked gently, almost with fatherly concern. Did Jack upset you? Or has your dear sister forgotten to write? She didn't answer. And he felt that if this continued, he wouldn't be able to resist. He would kiss her hair. Tell me everything, he said quietly. Maybe I can help. No. You'll despise me. Oh, Ned, I'm so ashamed. He laughed softly, incredulously, and brushed her hair with his lips, so lightly she didn't even notice. My dear girl, let's forget all of it, whatever it is. I want to tell you how much I love. She gave a cry of joy, but immediately groaned. It's too late. Too late, he repeated, stunned. Oh, why did I do it? Why? She moaned. He felt a cold clutch in his chest. What did you do? He asked. Billy. I'm a terribly wicked woman, Ned. I know you'll never want to speak to me again. Billy, he began hesitantly. Is he your brother? No, I don't know. I was so young. I couldn't stop it. Oh, I'm going mad. I'm going mad. Loretta felt his arms weaken. He gently stepped back and settled her into a large armchair. She bowed her head and began to sob again. He twisted his mustache angrily, pulled up another chair, and sat down beside her. I don't understand, he said. I'm so unhappy, she sobbed. Why? Because he wants me to be his wife. For a moment, Ned's face lit up. He placed his hand over hers, trying to soothe her. That shouldn't make a girl unhappy, he said thoughtfully. If you don't love him. You don't love him, do you? Loretta shook her head and shoulders with sudden force. You don't love him? He needed clarity. No, she cried. I don't love Billy. I don't want to love Billy. Well then, Bashford concluded, if you don't love him, there's no reason to feel miserable about his proposal. She burst into tears again, and through her sobs exclaimed, That's just the problem. Oh, if only I did love him. Oh, how I wish I could die. My dear child, you mustn't torment yourself so, he said gently, placing his second hand atop the first. Women do this every day. Just because you changed your mind or hesitated, just because you, forgive the word, led a man on and deceived him. Led him on and deceived him. She lifted her head and looked at him with tear-filled eyes. Oh, Ned, if only that were all. All, he repeated hoarsely, and his hands slowly slipped from hers. He wanted to speak, but thought better of it. But I don't want to marry him, she cried. Then don't, he replied calmly. But I have to. You have to. She nodded. That's a very strong word. I know, she said, trying to hold back her tears. Then, more quietly, she added, I'm a terribly wicked woman. No one knows what I am. No one but Billy. A silence fell. Ned Bashford's expression darkened, and he looked at her strangely. Billy knows, he finally asked. A timid nod and burning cheeks were her answer. He froze, like a swimmer hesitating at the edge of the dive. You must tell me everything, he said firmly. And you'll forgive me, she whispered. He hesitated, then drew a deep breath and plunged. Yes, he said with quiet resolve. I'll forgive you. Tell me. There was no one to warn me, she began. We spent so much time together. I didn't understand anything back then. She fell silent. Ned bit his lip nervously. If only I had known. Another pause. Go on, he urged. We saw each other almost every evening. With Billy? He asked, his voice flaring with such intensity that she flinched. Of course, with Billy. We were often alone together. If only I had known. I was so young. She wanted to say more, but stopped, glancing at him in fear. Scoundrel! Ned leapt to his feet, breathless with rage. He was no longer the weary Hellenist. He was a furious man. Billy is not a scoundrel. He's good, Loretta said firmly, startling him with her conviction. You mean to say it's all your fault? He snapped sarcastically. She nodded. What? He shouted. I'm the one to blame. I shouldn't have let it happen. I alone deserve reproach. He stopped pacing, and his voice softened. Very well. I don't blame you, Loretta. You've been honest. Billy is right, you are not. You must marry him. To Billy, she whispered. Yes. I'll help you. Where does he live? I'll make him do it. But I don't want to, she cried. Ned, you won't do this. I will, he said sternly. You must. And so must he. Understand. Loretta buried her face in the back of the chair and began to sob again. At first, Ned could make out only one thing. I don't want to leave Daisy. I don't want to leave Daisy. He paced the room grimly, then stopped, listening. How was I supposed to know? She wept. He never told me. No one had ever kissed me before. I never imagined a kiss could be so awful. Until he wrote to me. I got the letter this morning. Ned's face lit up, as if a glow had risen from within. That's why you're crying. No. His heart sank again. Then why? You said I have to marry Billy. But I don't want to be his wife. I don't want to leave Daisy. I don't know what I want. I want to die. He made one last attempt. Loretta, listen to me. Be sensible. What is it about the kiss? You haven't told me everything. I don't want to tell you everything. She looked at him pleadingly. Must I? She whispered. You must, he cried. You. Go on, Bashford demanded, his voice tinged with desperation. That's all, Loretta replied quietly. All, he repeated, unable to hide his doubt. All, she echoed, just as bewildered. I mean, nothing more? He felt awkward, almost lost. More? She asked, genuinely surprised. As if there could be anything else. Billy said. When did he say that? Bashford interrupted sharply. In the letter I received this morning. Billy wrote that my kisses are a disgrace if we don't get married. Bashford felt his head spin. What else did he say? He asked, trying to sound composed. He claims that if a woman allows a man to kiss her, she's obliged to become his wife. Otherwise, it's a crime. That's the custom, he says. But I think it's a cruel and unjust custom. I don't like it at all. I know I'm a wicked woman, she added defiantly, but I can't help myself. Bashford reached for a cigarette without thinking. Do you mind if I smoke? He asked, striking a match. But in the same instant, he seemed to come to his senses. Forgive me, he exclaimed, tossing aside both cigarette and match. I don't want to smoke. I didn't mean to. I just... He leaned toward Loretta, took her hands in his, sat on the arm of her chair, and gently embraced her. Loretta, I'm a fool. Yes, that's what I wanted to say. And something else. I want you to be my wife. Silence fell. He waited anxiously for her reply. I agree. If. If what? Tell me. If I'm not obliged to marry Billy. But you can't marry both, he nearly shouted. Isn't there such a custom? Like Billy said? There's no such custom. Well then, Loretta, will you be my wife? Don't be angry with me, she said, pouting slightly, though her eyes looked at him meekly. He drew her close and kissed her. It would be a fine thing if such a custom really did exist, Loretta whispered, nestled in his arms, because then I'd be obliged to marry you, dear Ned. Wouldn't I?